Hi, Luke Frannon here from AIT, and we're looking at a question on internal control in the auditing exam paper, where you're asked to identify and explain 7 significant deficiencies in the sales and receivable system, which is outlined in the scenario above, and make a recommendation to address each deficiency. So 20 marks, and that's it there. And here's the question. Here's the scenario. I'll just leave it on the screen. You can pause it there. Move down to get the second half. So you've seen all the question, and when you're doing a question like this, it helps to know the controls that should be there in a system. So I've got this from the BPP Learning Media from their pass cards. So the BPP pass cards are a really good revision aid. And this is looking at the internal controls in the sales system. So it divides the sales system to 3 main areas and says these are the main aims of the ordering department, the dispatch department, and the accounting stroke recording credit control department. And it's a form of segregation of duties here. So when we talk about segregation of duties, we talk about dividing up tasks into and processes into different areas. And this is an example of segregation of duties, that you have different departments looking after different responsibilities. And one department or one area checks the work of another. So it's a way of identifying errors or fraud. So for example, the order department, when they get a copy of the goods dispatch note, they will be able to check the goods dispatch note against their own sales order, and that'll help them identify any problems or any orders that have not been sent yet. And it'll, in the same way with invoicing, and we'll look at that later. But here are the controls. So in these questions, you're either usually asked to identify weaknesses, or else you'll be asked, given a scenario, and saying what controls would you expect to find in the system. Discuss maybe 6 or 7 key controls you'd expect to find and how would you test them. So, but this question asked about identifying weaknesses and making recommendations. So I'll go back. There's the pass cards again, really good. If you're studying for your professional exams, I'd recommend getting the pass cards. Here's a student answer on this, and it's quite good, but it can be improved, and that's what I'm going to try and do with it. So first of all, the student has done the table, and you see the table being used quite a lot in the recommended solutions by BPP or ACCA or Kaplan, whoever's the provider. And I would just say in an exam, I'd nearly recommend students to write, not to use tables, to write it out, because it looks like you've written lots, but sometimes you haven't written all that much when you use these tables. And you'll see what I mean in a minute. So, but the main thing is student is good here. It's very organized, and you can identify and explain. So this column is the identify and explain, and this column is the recommendations. So first one, we have it here, the detail on the sales rep. One sales representative visits boutiques. Okay, so the first thing they're saying here is responsible for taking in and new customers, and the company might not know if the new customers will be able to pay. There's no record of checking credit checks. Okay, and that's good. It could be explained a bit better, so I'm going to just reword that. And then the recommendation is good to reduce the credit history evidence, and I just reword it slightly to make it clear. So here's the first one, and I've reworded it. So just the same as what the student had said. And I've just said here, there's no detail of the sales rep carrying out a credit check on new customers. And therefore, the company may take on a new customer with bad credit history, which will increase the chances of not getting paid. So it's like that's the explanation of why it's a weakness. Well, the company is going to take on probably bad debts. So the recommendation is always usually very clear. The sales rep should carry out a credit check on new customers. And then just to add a bit more, because like, that's not a whole lot, to make it more practical and more real life, like there are many companies who offer a credit check service for a fee, and like Shanley or the sales rep, and I suppose I could use Shanley or the sales rep, but I mean the sales rep could use these, and it would have to be authorized by Shanley. But that's one way around it. If a sales rep was to say, I don't know how to do a credit check, or I don't have the resources, well, use one of these companies that'll do it for you on the cloud. So that's the first one. Here's the second one. So there isn't the problem with taking orders without checking the inventory, and they lead to bad reputation of company and conflicts between loyal client groups. That's good. Just needs a bit of tweaking to be just that fully 100% clearer. And then the inventory check should be ranged. Yes. So I'll just go down to the second one here. So, okay. This may lead to, I'll just be clear, to stockouts. So you want to say what the problem will be. Stockouts and Shanley not being able to complete orders. That bit was missing, I'd say, from the student answer. And then lead to bad reputation of company and conflicts between loyal client groups, where the sales rep has to, or the company Shanley has to decide who it can give the goods to. So that was very good. Just, that bit was clearer. And then a inventory check should be arranged. Ideally, could be done online via the sales rep phone at the time the order is placed. So just once again, another line to kind of give that extra small bit with it. Number 3, order form is referenced. Order form should be numbered. And to avoid confusion and conflicts, that's fairly good, but it could be better. Again, you're missing you want to use the important audit terms of completeness, of missing documents. That's the real thing. So instead of confusion and conflicts, that's fine. But the key thing that we're looking at here is if they're not numbered, there could be missing order forms. The auditor, external auditor, and management in Shanley won't be able to check completeness. And then I would say printed numbers, sequential. You need to say sequential numbering. So they're the areas I would recommend here. So this is new. There's no way to identify missing order forms. And all order forms should be numbered. Well, I suppose that's and I've got the sequentially in here. And the reason that is to allow managers and auditors to check completeness orders. And to explain the problem, why it's a problem. At the moment, there's no way to identify missing order forms, which could increase the chances of orders being lost or fraud. And the fraud will be probably by the sales rep. So here's the recommendation, and I suppose my last point there is pretty much like recommendation, but they kind of sometimes you'll have a bit of crossover. Okay, print is sequential numbers, and follow up on customer complaints about slower orders is good, and then you'd also want missing orders somewhere. That's because that's what we're looking at. Missing orders, completeness, sequential. They're the key things probably that we're missing from the answer that have been bold there. Number 4, so no record regarding, and down here, the sales rep passes the completed forms to the warehouse, and the completed order is dispatched from the warehouse by courier. Okay, so like here, students identify that there's no check done on matching the goods dispatched to orders taken, which is good, and then saying that's the problem. So that's good. And then sample check can be done goods dispatch notes. And instead of sample checks, I would say it should be done every time. That's the big recommendation I'd say here. The quality check, or the check that you're talking about, should be done every time, not spot check or sample check. And I know in real life, It might be difficult to check everything, but you don't, you're making a recommendation here, so uh, you can afford to give the full recommendation. So the dispatch department, okay. So because of this weakness, damaged goods may be shipped or the wrong goods may be shipped to the client. And I've said and I've called it a quality assurance check, maybe, or something like that. Prior to dispatch to ensure goods being dispatched match the order form. And then this is you explaining why it's an issue. This is kind of the implication of it. Damaged goods may be shipped. And then, so that this is the recommendation, should do a quality assurance check on goods. So don't say sample or spot checks. Just tell them to do it each time. I didn't mean to say also there. I'd say always. The goods should be matched to the order form on the goods dispatch note. That's the key thing. And then any damaged items should be identified and replaced. And there's plenty there. You've written a good bit there for your recommendation. Here's Roderick prepares the invoice and sends one copy of the invoice. The customer retains a second copy. And then Roderick does lots of stuff here. He inputs the invoices, files them alphabetically, and then goods dispatch notes are not retained. So, there's lots of problems here. One of them is, which is identified here, is that Roderick has undertaken many duties which will lead to fraud or error. And that's good. Segregation of duties is mentioned. That's important. And I'll just improve it slightly, but the core of it is there in that answer. So you need to just explain why that'll lead to fraud errors. Like you're saying, this will lead. So you need to explain why, because no one is checking his work, or he has ample opportunity to hide errors or hide fraudulent activities, because really no one is checking his work, and he's involved in lots of stages of processes. So here we are. So that's the bit that was missing. And just to show you wouldn't have to do this. I just mentioned teaming and lading is where someone in a company, if like Roderick opens the post daily in remittances. So if someone sends cash, he could take that cash and go off and spend it himself. And then the next customer that sends in cash a week later, he could use some of that cash and put it against the old customer's account. So he could that's teaming and lading, where you're taking money from customers and then you're moving money in and out of customer accounts to try and hide your fraud. So companies should start to segregate. That's what was said. And then maybe just to be a bit plain, they should hire more staff. And then, we can relate to the questions. He's involved for invoice. Another staff member should be responsible for remittances. So just you can, good plain English, hire more staff. That's the big one. What else was there? He shouldn't read opening post as another weakness, and by his own. Alphabetically by customer name isn't great. Invoices should be. Well, I suppose maybe you could argue. Let's see what else. Oh yeah, goods dispatch notes are not recorded, which is definitely a problem, or not retained. That was a big problem. Yeah, and there's two issues here. So if student nearly has two things here, they could just focus on one and had the invoices as a number 7. So one of them is each Friday he does the invoices. So really the recommendation is he should be doing it daily, and it's to update, so the company has updated information more. And also there could be cut-off errors at year end is a big problem here. So if I was doing on the invoice, the problem with that is it'll take 3 or 4 days for some sales to be recognized in the ledger. And at month end and year end, there could be cut-off errors if month end is before the Friday. Roddy won't be recording items until the start of the next month. So he'll be recording sales in the wrong month. And you talk about cutoff error there. And so the answer there, invoice should be input daily to know what was missed and no cutoff errors. So that would happen in the last week. But my answer, I just concentrated. And then the next one is goods dispatch notes are not retained. So there was two different things there. So the student could have split this out. So my answer, I've just looked at the goods dispatch notes not being retained. So they give evidence goods were dispatched. The sales rep will not know goods were dispatched. Shanley will not know. The company will not know. I'm going to repeat myself there. And I suppose a customer can complain about an order and ask for more goods to be sent, even though they're received. And if we didn't have the goods dispatch note, there's no evidence. And and then also uh, the big one is the sales rep will not know that goods were not dispatched. So we're going to say what should be done is should be filed and to deal with future complaints. Okay, and the big one is that's what the student said, which is fine. To evidence goods were dispatched and received. That's the bigger one really. Evidence goods were dispatched and received. And also the sales rep should receive a copy, and then they should reconcile the order. So that allow them to identify outstanding orders and then to follow up with dispatch and say, why hasn't this gone out? You want to, the customer hasn't received, amend the order and it hasn't been received or hasn't been sent out to them yet. And then another thing to say there, but you could even get another one out of this because that's enough what I've said there for recommendation. And the courage to get the customer's signature, so proof the customer received. And I think the student has that as one of their weaknesses. And that's fine. I think they're number 8. Yeah, that was it. That was good. So that's a separate one. And not choosing the ledger. That was on the next page. Not paid in the 90 days. Okay, you could say there might be a better way of doing that in terms of size as well is important. The size of the debt as well as the age of the debt. And Roderick doesn't use control accounts, so we'll look at that one. And here it is. This will increase the chance of not identifying errors, and you need to explain why that is. What does the control account do? So you need to show that you know what the control account does. So I'll just show you what I've written here. So that's the bit really I've added. A sealed control account is an important control to check that was posted in the ledger account agrees with the total sales daybook and cash book figures. So the control account is populated from the daybooks, the total cash received from receivables, the total sales made. Your total sales less your cash received should give you, the total outstanding receivables. So you'll have to adjust for discounts and returns, but you'll have them in the returns daybook. And then you compare the total of those, which are not part of the double entry system, against the total of the individual T accounts. And if there's a difference, there's an error somewhere, so it'll have to be reconciled. So that's what it does. It's kind of control over completeness. I could mention completeness here. And accuracy. Because so control over completeness because the information is coming from outside of the ledger. So it's outside of the double entry, the debits and credits. The daybooks are outside of that. So it's a source kind of information, which is always a completeness check. And then Shanley could use control accounts and bank recs and other recs. And then, we want to write something else, we'll say, don't get Roderick to do it. Better for someone else. And that's it. So that was a good answer by the student, and it was just what I was trying to do was just show you how to improve it a bit, and also I think uh, don't bother using a table in the exam because it'll just I think students think they've written a lot in the table when actually sometimes it's easier just to do it here, and they're less likely then to uh, write less. So thanks for watching, and I hope that's useful.